Well, welcome back to our podcast. This month, we are focused on Minority Mental Health Awareness Month. And so we are in part 2 of this podcast series where we're looking at diversity. And in today's episode, what we really want to focus on is something that's crucial for us as therapists. And that's learning how to identify when our clients have been mistreated, they've been marginalized, or disenfranchised. So often, I think what gets labeled as mental health symptoms is actually a natural response to what is ongoing abuse, discrimination, or really, honestly, systemic harm. And so I think it would be great for us to unpack how mistreatment shows up, how it can impact our clients, what is abuse, right? Just start to kind of peel back the layers of how do we as therapists start to identify and catch this.
Oh, yes, that's so good. That's so good, Alyssa. Thank you for saying that. I actually am struck because you know how it was a late night the last couple nights, and I was doing a little research on some of the things that we are trying to do with the Institute, and I came across some YouTube videos, a series of YouTube videos from years ago about this Turpin family. This Turpin family is like, I think it was 13 children who were abused by one mother, father. Set. I don't know if you ever heard of them. It was a crazy story, girl. You'll have to look it up. It's so sad, also so redemptive. Anyway, I was really struck because there were 13 kids in this family and they were just stuck inside of their home. It was filthy. They didn't have ever had enough food. Sometimes we're eating ketchup packets for
Oh,
meals, stuck, disciplined by being put inside of cages and chained to their
mm,
beds, like all this extreme stuff. And toward the end of the video series, the documentary I was watching, I saw there was a an adult man who was writing a letter basically to society, and he had gone to grade school with one of these kids who had been abused. He said, I remember this girl. I remember her. Now by the time she was discovered, she was, I think, in her 20s, but when he remembers her, she was like 6, right, in his school. And he said nobody wanted to be around her. Nobody wanted to talk to her. Nobody did anything. The teachers didn't do anything. The other kids didn't know what to do. And this man who was writing is now a medical doctor, and he was saying just basically an open letter to society and saying, we need to teach our kids how to be kind. We need to teach our kids how to notice this kind of thing, because here, a decade and a half later, until this daughter, this child is discovered in this abusive home, and how many more kids later, 12 kids later, this abuse went on and on and on. And it's isn't a horrific story. It's a sign of, like, there were neighbors that saw what's going on. There were people from the school that just, we turn a blind eye oftentimes. And as
right.
therapists, we're not supposed to do that. Not just
That's right.
because that's our job and that's our role, but more because we are raising the standard in society of what it means to be caregivers,
Mm,
what it means
mm.
to love one another, what it means to honor each other as a created being. Don't you agree?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, gosh, what a heartbreaking story. Um, and I love that message at the end that you're conveying about we need to learn to be kind, while also being aware, right? And looking at how do we catch this, and make
Right.
sure that we're tuned in enough. I think as I think about that and really starting to unpack this conversation with you about what does this actually look like? How do we catch these signs? Um, I would say, as therapists, there's a lot of buzzwords right now, being triggered, being, it felt like abuse. Like it felt traumatizing. A lot of these things are being overused, right? So when we're looking at how do we actually differentiate between, is this mental health struggles? Is this systematic mistreatment? What's really going on here? I'm just curious, Monica, how do we tell the difference, right? What are some signs of abuse?
Yes, that's such a good point, Alyssa. I do think I was really struck by the words of that medical doctor who had gone to grade school with this girl who was being abused. It struck me. It struck a chord in me. Like, are we going to turn a blind eye as culture, as humans? I mean, as therapists, we are mandatory reporters. Like, if we see abuse, we are required to report it. And as far as I'm concerned, like, I think we're all mandatory reporters. Like, we see something going on with kids, with somebody being harmed, and we think, oh, I'll just turn my head and I don't want to be bothered with it. Versus, you know what? We are, like we said in our first video, we are an us in human culture, and we want to protect each other from harm. And so I know if I'm working with a client and I'm noticing what's going on with this person. Are they over, like you say, overusing a term or minimizing, using a term that but really not actually experiencing that level of experience. Like, is it really abuse? Is it really a mistreatment, or is it interpersonal conflict? I think what we're looking for is, there's a difference between when in interpersonal conflict there's an assertiveness versus an aggressiveness. Now, a
Mm,
lot of times we are, as humans, overly sensitive, and when someone's assertive with us, it hurts our feelings. We don't like to be called out. We don't like the feedback. It hurts. We have a hard time metabolizing the feedback, so we push it back on the
yes.
person. And we make assumptions. Well, you're calling me this, or you're doing this to me, and that's more of like a victim mentality and a martyr syndrome. Versus when we hear that a client is being treated aggressively, which the way I think of aggression is like a person is disrespecting the other person. They're standing up for themselves, but in a way that's disrespectful and harmful. And we know that any type of name calling and mockery and stereotyping and gaslighting, that's a term we might talk a little bit more about the end here. Anything like that, a mistreatment that is treating, giving one person superiority or favor
Mm,
over another, right? Not based on merit. Also, physical and sexual aggression, right? Like, when that kind of thing is happening, it's not right. And we know when we hear our clients talking about certain things that that our clients are going to need to be validated for the mistreatment they're experiencing rather than minimized.
yes. Yeah, and I think what I often see, Monica, is that when we have especially minorities, that they are being marginalized. There is some sort of systemic abuse happening. Um, it seems like more often than not, they are minimizing it. They're saying it's not a big deal. But we feel it within ourselves, right? That what you're talking about, that power imbalance, or somebody is less than and somebody is being put into more of a position of power. And when we sense that, our own intuition of this doesn't feel right. Um, and then our clients, oftentimes, because I think so often these minority groups end up um, adopting kind of codependency as a coping strategy to deal with this, right? To just be easygoing, to let it go, to not make a big deal of it. Oftentimes, when I see that within people, it's a really good indication to me there's more to explore here.
That's
There's probably more
good.
that we need to go back and talk about.
Yes, exactly, exactly. I think codependency, wow, that's been a term that's been around since I think the 80s, right? And so we know we usually think of it in terms of addiction, like alcoholism. An alcoholic has a codependent who is enabling their
Right.
behavior. But that really, codependency is a very common thing. It's really, it has to do with from Pat Springle's book, it has to do with a lack of objectivity, either being controlled or can be controlling, and then a false sense of responsibility. And isn't that what you're talking about? When there's this false sense of responsibility, someone's treating me a certain way based on their issues, and I feel responsible for it. And so then I compensate for their behavior and try to minimize it to myself and to others, just to kind of keep the peace and kind of fly under the radar, to not be noticed. And then that enhances or continues to keep that cycle of um, mistreatment going, right? Because nobody's now standing up for what's right. Nobody's
That's
having
right.
nobody's having a voice. I think about
That's right. And
Go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, like, along the lines of codependency, I think that we call it a lot of different things. Like, oh, everybody says that I'm just so easygoing.
Yes.
Now, I'm not saying that's always that we're codependent, but at times I think it means that we've learned to silence ourselves, right? And not to speak up when somebody is doing something that feels oppressive to us, um, or feels like rejection. I
Yes.
also think that, you know, we call it people pleasing. I'm such a people pleaser. That can be another label for codependency. And really, when we look at codependency or people pleasing or being easygoing, a lot of these are survival responses because
Yes.
it feels easier than challenging, right? And calling attention to. And I like that you use the word responsibility, that it is taking on this additional responsibility, because now we're holding all of the weight of that interaction instead of sharing responsibility with the person who maybe said something or did something that was painful. Yeah, we stay silent.
Yes. Yes. I agree with that. I'm thinking about how, well, actually the other day I had a friend confront me about something, and she was like pretty intense when she confronted. It was one of my best friends, and she had some things to say. And when we debriefed about it later, I said, "Hey, I'm glad for you to confront me. Like, I want to hear your feedback. I want to hear what you're processing." And she felt badly. She said, "Oh, I didn't like the way I did that." And I said, "Well, oftentimes when we're learning to have a voice, because this friend just happens to be more of a people pleaser, like she's more of an Enneagram 9 or peacemaker, and that's one of the things that she's wanting to grow in. And I said, oftentimes what I experience is that when you're trying to get the gumption up to have a voice, it ends up coming across really intense. And that's not who you typically are, but maybe you've been pushed down and shut down for so long and felt disenfranchised and mistreated for so long, that when it comes up, more anger comes up with it, and you can overshoot into aggression. But it's like that sense of getting used to not being codependent, right? And say, I have a voice. There's something I have to say. And what I have to say is just as important as what you have to say. And what my experience is something that I need you to hear. And Alyssa, I think about this idea that what we really want to do in culture is match strength to strength, right? That if there's a majority group, whether it's race or whether it's about as other type of disorder or mental health issue or something like that, but there's a majority group that's saying, hey, this is the way it is, and this is what we think, and this is what we want, and we don't have the other group confronting and saying, hey, that doesn't feel good to us, or this is the way we want it, and doing so with strength, there will be no balance. Like Wilder would talk about, like in Escaping Enemy Mode, they talk about this idea that we encourage the weak to confront the strong. That's how we bring balance.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I think that going back to you talking about even people feeling silence, and then sometimes it can come out in this aggressive way, or it's like, I'm working so hard to find a voice and speak up. I think that also speaks to why therapy can be so important, right? This is a space for them to have a voice, to have somebody sit with them and validate and hear their story and be with them in it. And really get the practice of having a voice, so that when they are in situations where we do need to hear from them, we do need this balance. We want to have their voices included. It can be done in a way that's honoring, right, for everybody, that they're able to speak up in a way that not as just honoring to other people, but aligns with them, right? And their character and who they were created to be.
So good. And I think as therapists, our goal is to be gentle, protector, dominant, right? That our brain is dominant, but not domineering, right? But in a way of being gentle protectors. That's what Life Model talks about. And so oftentimes what people are feeling when they've been disenfranchised and mistreated is that those around them who can't handle their voice are gaslighting them. And gaslighting means blaming them for how they're acting and causing them to feel like they're doing something wrong, when really it's the oppressor who's doing something wrong, right? And so as therapists, I think we're supposed to stand up and say, no, that was wrong. It's not okay that you were treated like that. And in that way, validate. Now, we can't go out into the world with the client and protect them outside of, being involved with mandatory reporting, et cetera, et cetera. But what we're trying to do as therapists is not be the voice for the client, but to connect with our clients in a way that helps them feel seen, heard, known, understood, and important, and helping them to navigate where they might be taking on ownership for things, the mistreatment that is not theirs to take on, so that they can get a foundation to be able to have a voice and speak that strength to those who might be oppressing them.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think what you're talking about, Monica, when we look at gaslighting essentially erodes our sense of reality. That could be intentional or unintentional. Someone telling me a story that I just disagree with, right? They're saying this was racism. Me even simply saying that wasn't racism can be a form of gaslighting. So when these people do speak up and they're not validated in their experiences, they don't have people that are with them in it, that can leave them really confused. It can start to, just like I said, erode their sense of reality. And then they're trying to not only make sense of what has happened to them, but I think when we look at it even from a life model lens, they're having a really hard time accessing their identity, right? And who they are in order to then show up in the world as an integrated person, right? And be able to speak up and have a voice.
And it's our goal, right? Sorry to interrupt you, but it's our goal as therapists to reflect accurate identity and to see individuals through the lens of who they truly are, in their truest redeemed self, and help them play to that. So I'm looking forward to this last video in our series, this last podcast, where we're going to be talking a bit more about how to apply life model informed therapy to minority mental health for this month. So thanks, Alyssa, and we'll talk again soon.